Well, welcome everybody. Rick, so great to have you here with us. I was sharing with Will beforehand that you are the son-in-law of one of my good friends, Bob Creekhouse, who is kind of a walking miracle in my mind. One of the sharpest, wisest guys I know.
It's true. He's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, so great to have you here. For those who don't know Rick or haven't come across him, you run a writers group on Substack. That's one of the many things you do. You've got a deep spiritual practice. You have written multiple books. You're a public speaker. You juggle, I think, ride a unicycle. You do a variety of things and do, I think, one of the most creative keynote addresses I've ever seen done. Uh, for those who haven't seen it, they should go to your website. I think it's ricklewis.co, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're delighted to get a chance to have you on and just kind of explore a variety of topics, one of which is about story itself.
Hey,
Uh,
can I interject? Because the one question I'm kind of showing up with is your waiter thing that you do, like when you're a keynote, is so cool. How did you come up with that idea? It's a simple concept, and you should just explain it for listeners, viewers here. But how did you come up with that?
Well, I didn't. It happened by accident. I was kind of fell into it by accident. And I'm happy to tell you the story. It's a great story. But thanks for having me. I just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast. And I don't know how many of your guests begged their way into it, but that's basically what I did. I said, Chris, because I've listened to a number of your podcasts and, knowing Chris, I'm like, I want to be on your podcast. So thank you for letting me shoehorn my own way into your podcast.
We have a very high bar. People need to want to be on the podcast.
Yeah, so the waiter routine. So I'd been working as a comedian for years. I started in theater, did a lot of theater growing up, professional theater, traveled with a Broadway musical for a while, um, and then decided that what I really enjoyed was variety entertainment and performing. And I kind of looked around and went, the quickest way for me to be able to do juggling, acrobatics, unicycling, magic, and whatever I want as producer, writer, actor, director of the whole thing was to just go to the street. And so I was a street performer for about 10 years and I made a full living as a street performer. For a number of years there, I was cresting a six figure income as a street performer and just figured out what worked and absolutely loved it. Best time of my life. Like there's absolutely nothing like the feeling of getting paid, one, to give away your product and service, and then after the fact, have people pay you, knowing at that point whatever they're paying you is absolutely what it's worth because they've already gotten it. They can walk away if they want. It's purely voluntary to pay for it. And I made to make my living that way, like directly people putting cash in my hat and taking that cash and going and buying my groceries and paying my rent. Something about that was just so tremendous. That was here in Canada, in
Very
Vancouver.
cool. I know
Um,
the feeling. I had an energy center for years in Victoria, I think 6 years, and we ran entirely on contributions. And so I know that feeling of just giving
yeah,
generously with no strings attached and finding
yeah,
people returning the same way. It's kind of miraculous.
it really is. I miss it so much. But so anyway, I had been functioning as a street performer, and then actually the VP of GE Plastics saw me in a street show and pulled me aside after a street show and said, "Hey, I didn't know who he was. Like, I've got this meeting. I've got in Florida. I was in Vancouver, and he said I got this meeting in Florida. I had never done any corporate events ever as a performer, as a presenter." And he said, "I have this meeting. What would could you come down and do what you do for my meeting?" And I was like, sure. And I was really excited. And he hands me his card and it says, GE. He's a VP of GE Plastics. I'm like, holy crap. And then he said, what would you charge? And I had no clue I had no clue where to start. So I made up a number that was like 3 times more than I thought, would be right. And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. And I'm like, damn. So so I went and did that event, and that spun into. So I did that first event, my street style show in a conference room for 500 international leaders in GE. And that spun into, just from that one event, a couple other people who were there, and I just started doing corporate work. And it wasn't long. It was, I don't know, maybe a couple of years of doing that I had been hired for an event here in Canada for 500 bankers in a ballroom. And I was supposed to do my comedy show, and I was standing in the doorway of the kitchen waiting for lunch to go out. They were going to serve all the lunches, and then I was supposed to go on and do my entertainment. And I'm standing there waiting for the lunches to go out. They're all lined up in the hallway of the hotel kitchen. 400, plated steak and potato lunches on Queen Mary's waiting to go out. And I'm standing there in the kitchen, and then I hear this shout, and I turn around and I look back, and one of the steaks, one of the last remaining steaks on the grill had caught fire. So, flames coming up, little small grease fire. Someone runs for a fire extinguisher, but before they can get back, the entire remaining row of steaks catch fire, and there's enough smoke that the oven hood can't handle it all. There's smoke billowing up into the kitchen, and people shouting, running around. And the next thing I know, the industrial fire sprinkler system goes off in the kitchen. So it took, if you've never seen an industrial fire sprinkler system do its job, it does it very well. It doesn't mess around. It's like, okay, if there's a problem here, if there's flames somewhere, we're going to get rid of it. So it took about 17 seconds for every single one of those 400 plated lunches to be destroyed in the water that was coming down. So, and I'm standing there. I'd stepped, I was already in the doorway. I stepped out of the hall, watching what was going on. And the event planner comes running back, and she's like, "Oh my God, like what is happening?" And so I'm thinking, oh, geez, she's on the phone trying to get food called in from another nearby hotel to replace the lunch that these grumbling, entitled, hungry bankers are waiting for. And now it's going to be like another hour wait. And I'm like, wow, man, what can I do? How can I help? This really sucks for this poor event planner in this event. And so I'm still standing there kind of in the doorway, and I look over, and there's a server apron hanging right next to the door. And having done a lot of, I've been doing improv for years. Street is all about you roll with whatever happens. And so I reached over and I put on the apron with the idea of I'll go out into the audience, I'll act like just a goofy, odd server, and everyone will know I'm just, goofing around, and we'll just have some fun. It'll be like an improv bit. So I put on the apron, I walk out, and I grab the first a water pitcher that's right there in a tray jack stand. And I go over to the first table, and I lift it way up, and I start pouring water from a height of about 3 feet into the glass, and it's kind of slopping all over the place. And I fill it so full till it forms a meniscus on the surface that there's no way you could even pick it up to drink it. And then just say to the woman there, is that enough water for you? And, and she just kind of looks at me like, so I'm starting this weird business going around the table figuring, oh, this is going to be really fun. But no one knew it was a joke. They were just getting upset. So I tried to be more broad, more egregious, more, theatrical, and I'm just, I'm slopping stuff around, I'm dropping silverware on the floor. And no matter whatever I did, these bankers just got more and more upset. And they weren't, it wasn't like tweaking for them, like, oh, this is an act. And so about my fifth pass through the room, as people were getting and more bent out of the shape, uh, going back into the kitchen to look for more props, for more things to do. And about my fifth pass through the room, the thought I had was, I think I've just discovered my life's purpose, which is to piss off conference attendees. It was so much fun because it was like doing a miniature Rorschach test because every single person has got a different response to the same input. So you've got this wide range of leaders and people in all sorts of capacities and corporate environment, and everyone is coming to a different conclusion about who I am, how I got my job, how I'm keeping it, what's going on, how they should respond. Half the people want to take me home and give me a safe place to stay where I won't hurt myself. The other half want to take me out back and just get rid of me. So it was fascinating. It was a fascinating bit, and it has never ceased to uh, entertain me. And it's so instructive. It's just such an amazing human dynamic. I said in my book, it was like doing an accidental sociology study over a period of the last 20 years, just seeing
Totally. I mean, it's
all the way
interesting.
through.
If you've seen Wilson, my book, Thriving in Business and Life,
Yeah,
the first
yeah,
chapter is about the stories we create. And
yeah,
you were running it, like you said, a sociology experiment where, you were giving people input and they got to decide what to do with that input, what they made it mean. And that whole notion that, we are the ones who decide what we make life mean. And it's our interpretation. But I think the thing that's wild, such an absolutely perfect lab experiment that you were doing,
right.
but it so kind of illustrates the point that I think we forget, or at least it's easy to forget, that we are always doing that. We're always making up stories. We're always imposing meaning. And, you know, here you were the instigator in giving people a chance to realize that. And then afterwards, you get up and become the keynote, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really fun moment. I go to the front of the room and start stammering and pretending like I've been asked by the management to apologize. So so I get up and I'm like, yeah, I'm really I'm real sorry. My manager just asked me to say something. It was my first day at this hotel, and well, I had a bunch of first days at other hotels, but so I go like this, I start like this, and I'm just like stammering, and people are like, "Oh my God, this is so weird! Like, what? Like, why are they doing this? Like, no one has ever seen anything like this at a 4 or 5 star hotel, because I'm at these high-end resorts, and and then I milk that for a couple minutes, and then I put up a hidden camera photo of someone who is responding to me. Their jaw is like basically on the floor. They're sitting there just like looking at what I'm doing. And then I say to everybody, how many of you are aware you've been part of a 60-minute social experiment? And there's like a 3-second pause. And then the room erupts. It's just like, oh no, we've been totally had. But what's fascinating is you can almost see it on people's faces. The first thing they do is they press the rewind button because they're like, oh no, what did I do? How did I behave? And so it's this moment, just like you were saying, in terms of a moment of self-reflection. It's not until they realize, oh, I was totally misassigning the meaning here. How did I behave? And did I compromise myself, like by did I show my cards basically? Did it become obvious that I have this whole range of assumptions about waiters or about, people who I deem incompetent or so it makes for a fascinating conversation. And it's really neat because it's in the guise of theater and humor. It's disarming enough that I can actually have that conversation with people and they aren't threatened by it because everyone has just had the same experience.
Yeah.
They've all been rused and everybody falls for it. So then it's like, okay. And people are open to looking at, okay, what's your default when things aren't going as
Yeah.
planned or your
Yeah.
expectations aren't being met or your territory is threatened. Yeah.
Well, you stumbled into a really innovative way to challenge people's bias and to really identify how they're comparing unconsciously what's happening to what they think should happen.
Yeah.
I would imagine that that's a perfect opener for what you really want to talk about, which, looking at your site, I can get you into innovation, open-mindedness, exploration, curiosity, but you use such a good disruptive technique to kind of get in there. It's really brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is brilliant. I didn't come up with it. Like the universe supplied it. And I'm so grateful. Like, the whole thing of just embracing, moving toward whatever you get. And in that circumstance, when the fire sprinkler system went off, rather than going home or just saying, I'm sorry, I can't do this now. Like the best things in life for me professionally have always come from, okay, things have been disrupted. What do we do now? And it's like you move toward and find some way to engage with the circumstance, and then the best things come out of those kind of moments.
It's interesting as you say that to be able to roll with what's happening with what is. I remember when 9/11 took place, I was doing a speaking gig at Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis. And obviously, tragically, that whole thing got very interrupted, and I had to take the rental car and drive it all the way home because there were no planes flying. And pretty much every gig that I had at that point for the rest of the year was canceled
Yeah.
because nobody knew what was going to happen. And I remember going to my mentor, who we were collaborators in our business endeavor together. And I was like, wow, what are we going to do? And he said, oh, no, this is perfect. We just need to remind people that they need us more than ever.
Mm.
So he just took what was, and for him, it wasn't a moment of fear or hesitation. It was like, no, what we have to offer is more important than ever. Let's go out and just let them know. So within a fairly short period of time, suddenly we were back on a whole new topic, mind you, on a
Yeah.
whole new area. But it was interesting, that ability to roll with what's happening. I mean, clearly you learned that in improv and other things, but that's such a great gift in life to be able to adapt like that.
Yeah, there's always another door, isn't there? And it's so, like you said, you were talking earlier about the mind and what we forget. It's fascinating to me how it's like in spiritual circles may talk about people becoming awake or enlightened as some kind of as a miracle or an incredible event. And I kind of see it as the opposite. I think the miracle is how sleep induced we can remain. Like whatever this mechanism is that continues to throw this fog in front of us, that we continue to not see that there's a filter between life and how it lands for us. And then we take it as well, this is the way it is. It's real. It's, my interpretation of it is objectively how it is. The fact that we do that without pause over and over and over, I find that miraculous. It's like it's an incredible dynamic, and that occurs for almost every single person over and over and over. So it's really in terms of curiosity, I'm just more and more, yeah, fascinated by that dynamic and determined to like play with it. I think playfulness and play is our way out of the mess that
Well,
we're
I totally, totally agree. I mean, especially these days, things are so heavy,
in. Yeah,
and I think the antidote is levity. If there's too much gravity, let's have more levity. And the humor is such a wonderful way just to open people's hearts
yeah, for
because we
sure.
laugh together, you know?
Yeah.
Truly, truly. Will's reminding me of a time when I stumbled across a coaching technique uh, by accident. I grew up in a family where humor was a big part of the family. It was just part of the culture. And we laughed, especially at our most challenging situations and most biggest, our largest embarrassments. And I was coaching this one guy. He was a really super intelligent, bright guy who was running this large clinic. And he had a lot of things going on that were very challenging. And he started to tell me this one situation. And I mean, it was difficult and challenging, but the humor in it was just too much to miss. And I started to kind of chuckle a little bit. And I saw him kind of like pull back, like, "You're laughing at me?" And I said, "Hey, listen, I just have to warn you. Life sometimes is so absolutely, unbelievably ridiculous that sometimes I'm going to laugh. And that isn't, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at just the craziness of life.
Oh,
And so if you can laugh with me, it'll help us find a solution that we would have never found had we approached it with seriousness."
Yeah.
And he got it, thankfully.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
curious. I haven't studied into your work deeply, but I'm really curious. I always like to know how people in a position like you are, help others reframe their past experiences because a lot of our problems we drag forward from the past. Something happened 20 years ago, we're still traumatized by it. I have various reframing techniques for that. Well, how do you do that? How do you help people lighten up about past challenges and see the gift in it?
Yeah, for me, the way into that has not been cognitive. It's been um, behavioral in the sense of when you start to find yourself avoiding certain circumstances, shying away from, or trying to get away from, or do an end around certain um, duties or responsibilities or opportunities, that's a really good time to notice, oh, okay, there's something here for me to just put my toe across the line of just dip in a little bit and try something a little bit new. And I'm just always encouraging people to just do something that scares you a little bit. It doesn't even have to be a huge major thing, just something that's just a little bit out of your comfort zone. And that is the quickest way. Like exposure therapy, I think is just really underrated in terms of, culturally, we're just so supported to stay in our comfort zone, to avoid and have a level of convenience and that just allows us to create a life that is very narrow. And so I think just taking those little risks and doing things that are just a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit scary is the most direct route to that rewiring. Because there's nothing like being in a situation that you thought was going to go one way, and then it does, it turns out to be fabulous or delightful or easy when you thought it was going to be terrible and hard and disastrous or traumatic. And there's nothing like that new imprint as an adult, because most of that wiring comes from a very long time ago. And so as an adult to be able to update and go, oh gosh, that that was actually went just fine, and that worked, or that was really enjoyable. I think that's one of the most direct ways. And then as of late, the stuff I'm doing more of is supporting people with writing, and particularly storytelling, helping people recall memories, and then to, like, the word authority contains author it. In the word authority is author it. And so to go back, most people have not authored their life experiences. They're given, they live through it, but because they're given a script by their family environment or their culture, this is how you interpret these kind of events. They never consciously chose the meaning that they gave to most of their past life experiences. So to go back and recall stuff that's happened and write about it from the standpoint of what do I want this to mean? How do I hold this? Is a super powerful. That's a very deeply powerful activity for people. And so that's what I've been doing in the online community I'm running, Right Hearted, is helping people to just go back, look at these experiences again, and author them anew.
Mm. Well, I had one, Chris has heard this story, that I did exactly that with. And I'm a writer, so I'm resonating with what you're saying. It's a memory that tormented me for decades. I was like 6, 7, 8, 9 years old or something, vacationing with my family in the Okanagan Valley, you know, that area,
Yeah,
Peachland,
yeah.
Kelowna. And we used to camp in an orchard and had trailers and tents and stuff. So I'm entrusted with the big platter of morning eggs, and I'm delivering it into this trailer where there's like about 9 or 10 Wilkinsons gathered. And one thing about Wilkinsons is everybody loved their food. So I come in and it's a beautiful summer morning and I'm buoyant and I put my foot on the step and I go, "Have no fear, Billy is here." That's my name back then, Billy. And as I said that, I dumped all the eggs on the floor and they went surfing on the floor. These eggs
They were
running.
they were not cooked yet. They
They
were
were cooked, but they were just sitting there open on the platter.
oh, okay. Okay.
And, you know, I was going to dish them out, I guess, onto each plate. So they're like
Oh,
side up eggs, right? And so
oh.
they go hitting the floor and surfing over everybody's bare feet. And I'm like mortified, and
What an
everybody's
image.
laughing at me. And I'm like, where's the hole I can crawl into? That
Oh,
tormented me for years. You know, what an idiot. Why did I say that? And so finally, after, you know, I started doing this kind of work, I went, well, I'm tired of that memory. I want to change that. So I rewound, went back and said, well, what if I rewrote that I was a young comedian and I had the balls to try out this gag and it worked. Everybody laughed. So in my memory, I rewired a different emotion to the experience. I didn't change what happened, but I
huh.
just rewired the emotion and I replaced shame with pride and I added in taking a little bow as I left the trailer. And since then, I had to
Interesting.
redo the memory like 20, 30, 40 times. But now when I remember that, I get a smile on my face. I go, wow, I started early. You know, whatever humor stuff I've done, I got an early start.
How old were you when that happened?
Oh, I think I was probably about 10, 9,
Oh my
in that
gosh.
zone where you're really vulnerable because your ego is very
Totally.
fragile. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you're cogent enough to be able to grok what's going on.
yeah,
It really goes in, but you're also so vulnerable and
yeah.
open. Amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
That is the power of storytelling and reframing and so on. I had a just a dear friend who is a professional storyteller, and one of the things that she loved to do is volunteer to go into prisons and help the uh, men in the prison be able to recreate their story
Mhm.
uh, and give themselves a different context for who they were and where they were going to where they were going to go, whether that meant how they were going to continue to show up in prison if they were there for an extended period or what they were going to do. And I got a chance to witness some of that on film. It was just amazing to watch how people were just enraptured with her guiding them through the storytelling
Wow.
process and
Wow.
giving, like you were talking about, Will, giving a different context or a different meaning to what happened and re-identifying themselves in a different way. And I think, a lot of times we either, it's one thing to give somebody else, have a bias about somebody else. It's another thing to have a bias about ourselves. because I think a lot of times those are really tricky because, like Will was talking about, we've so deeply ingrained that into our sense of self
Yeah.
that to free ourselves up and decide to recreate that in a whole different way is remarkable. But if we don't author it, as you said, and really take take authority and take the sovereignty, if you will, of our own story, we're basically left with the story that was cast upon us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how much of the the healing or the reframe can come from just sharing the story out loud with other people, which we do a lot of in the group, and without even having to change the story, even just telling it the way it occurred for you with the current meaning. Often what will happen is you see through the eyes of other people that they interpret the story in a very different way. Like, Will, if you were to tell that story to a whole group of people, even without the reframe, you would see such lack of judgment on their part, such compassion for you as a 10-year-old, such and then when you see that through the eyes of the listeners, that is often how that rewiring happens. It's like a social order level rewiring where it's like crowdsourced rewiring, because by sharing the story with a larger group of basically good-hearted people, because people are generally, we're good-hearted beings. And when it gets reflected back, that's often where that healing happens. You go, oh, the thing I've been holding about what this meant about me is not at all what a room full of humans. That's not the consensus here.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah. Uh,
I've got a writing question for you, just since that's your field or one of them. I was working on a screenplay years ago, and we'd hired a consultant in Hollywood. He told me something. He said, "You probably won't get this right now, but later maybe you will." And it did take me quite a few years to understand what he said. I'd really like to get your input on it. He said, "The meaning in what you write resides in what you take out of it." It was very confusing to me at the
Mm.
time. But
Yeah.
what I learned was that in the rewriting, because if you know, writing is rewriting, taking all that stuff out, it's almost like their ghost of those words remains woven in between the lines. There's an invisible subtext which kind of gives the words soul. What's your take on that kind of esoteric writing principle?
Yeah, that's really cool. That's fascinating. Do you know the work of Bert Hellinger, the
Yeah, I do.
family constellation
We
work?
have done that work many times. Yeah.
It reminds me of that because
Yeah.
it's like, and for people who are not familiar with this work and the family constellation work, Bert Hellinger is the guy's name. He has this system that he invented where you get a room full of people together and they're going to do this thing called family constellation work. And he'll take somebody, he'll say, okay, who wants to volunteer to work on your past family dynamics? Someone will volunteer. They'll come forward and you'll say, okay, I want you to describe like a notable life experience, maybe something that was really hard or traumatic, or maybe a relationship that's unresolved for you. And the person will, I think actually they don't even describe the situation. He just says, choose someone in the room who can be a stand-in for your mom, or then for your dad or your brother. And so the person just energetically would go, okay, I think this person or that person. And often the person they chose, the person chosen for the dad could be a woman, or it's an energetic thing. And without giving any details of the story, he said, okay, now position them in the room where they would be, and where, like, energetically, where would you position them to represent how it felt for you as a kid? And so put people in positions, and then even, position the person a certain turn of the head. And then the instruction would be for these strangers who've never met this person before to start interacting and dialoguing with each other.
Yeah.
And however he worked this out and did it, the experience of the person who set all this up is one of like absolute and complete astonishment because the words that come out of the mouths of these not, non-professional actors who are now standing in and playing the family members are unbelievably accurate to the experience. And so there, this idea of story, what stories are, I think stories are pure magic. We don't understand yet how and why stories are the foundational blueprint of how we perceive, relate, think. Stories are magic. They're like there's
Totally.
mystery in them
Totally.
that we don't understand yet. And
Yeah.
it's literally how our brains are wired to orient us.
Well, it's like a secret that's hidden in plain sight because, I often say this to people if I'm doing any writing coaching. I say, um, words cast spells.
Yeah.
That's why we call it spelling. I mean,
Yeah.
there is. Why would
Yeah.
we call it spelling? Because
Yeah.
we're
That's cool. I
casting
like that.
spells with our words. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's it's interesting when I'm doing coaching with people. One of the first things I do is basically have them recount an experience that they had that's challenging for them that they're currently trying to work through. And so they tell me that story, and I say, then a lot of times, well, so tell me the story you think from the other person's point of view.
Mm.
What was their story? What do you think they thought was going on? Now, that's a fairly simple shift, right? But sometimes just in that,
Yeah.
the fact that they're looking at it, and if there was a third person, how do you think they saw it? All of a sudden, the realization dawns on them that, oh, there's it's not just one way, and that's the story. It's
Yeah.
suddenly you start to realize it's this multifaceted experience that people are having, and I love when things like that happen because that is part of the power of story, and looking at it from these different angles, to be able to realize that there's always some deep opportunity for us to grok something that we maybe haven't otherwise had the chance to get.
Totally.
I,
That's a
I,
brilliant exercise. Like so simple, but that's
Yeah.
what a shift.
I've got a good joke about that. Guy's at his therapist and he's explaining the problems he's having with his wife. And he says, man, she's got such a short fuse. She just keeps exploding. No matter what I say, she just blows up. And the therapist leaps out of his chair and he says, I know what the problem is. You confused your wife with a bomb. You think your wife is a bomb. I mean, that was his impression that she was set to explode no matter what.
Yeah.
But then he gathered
Totally.
proof to prove
Right.
that his story was right. And it took the therapist to alert him to the fact that he was actually making that up.
Right.
You know, what you're saying there, Will, is interesting, is that and we go into this in great detail in our book. I won't now, but basically there's part of the brain that actually looks for evidence to confirm our existing belief.
Sure.
And we're almost always going to find it unless we're willing to disrupt that cycle. And so the one simple thing, they call it the Subaru effect, is one of the names that a researcher gave it, that uh, he looked at it a slightly different way. You go shopping for Subarus, and on the way home, you see them everywhere because your unconscious mind is now tuned into Subarus. And so it's finding Subarus everywhere you look. They were there all along, you just didn't see it. And so, if I believe you're a good guy, if I believe you're a ne'er do well, whatever it is, I'm going to look for evidence to confirm that. And the realization that that's how our mind works is amazing. Just to consider the possibility that there's more to the story.
It's when you look at the list of different cognitive biases. If you do some research on that and just type in cognitive biases, you can see Wikipedia will give you like half of the ones that exist, but there's hundreds. There's hundreds of cognitive biases, and you look at those and you God, it's a wonder we even make it through any given day, like without, without imploding. It's just, but it's fascinating how these things have developed
Hmm.
in the human mind as a means of helping us. And it's not just survive, it's way beyond survival. It's meaning. Meaning is so central to our function, the meaning we assign to things,
Well,
and
and
to start being conscious of that process.
yes, yeah.
That's when you go, oh, holy crap! I have access to an entire dashboard of settings that used to be in an invisible closet I did not even know I had. And when you start getting access to those settings just by being aware of what's going on, it changes a lot.
Yeah, that I think that very question about meaning is so powerful. I one of the things we do is when somebody's grappling with some situation is to ask them, so what have you made that mean?
Yeah.
And the meaning that's imposed is usually so unconsciously done that it takes a minute, and then they start to realize that we made it mean this, this, and this, and then
Yeah.
another simple question: what else do you think you could make that mean?
Yeah.
And it's almost like, you mean that wasn't the only truth? You mean there's another way to look at this? I mean, this is all happening. It's kind of the cognitive dissonance when somebody asks a question. It's kind of like the changing of behavior you talked about. All of a sudden, it's taking a different angle, a different look at something that opens up this whole, uh, you know, aha for somebody to go, wow, oh my gosh, I could make it mean that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, I'm curious, what's up for you? Like in the work you do, you wouldn't be recognized, honored, paid for doing what you do if you weren't really inventive and creative. So, what's like bubbling to the surface, leading edge for you right now? These times are so disruptive. And I'm just curious, what's right on the edge for you that might be inspiring for our guests today, our listeners?
Where my attention is right now is on the end of scale, meaning like what I see so much of is that this push and this desire, especially from the business side, to scale everything. Let's make it big. Let's make it broader. Let's make it giant. Let's have more people involved. Let's have more money involved. Scale is, to me, approaching breakdown, or it's already in breakdown. And I see in small intentional communities as the safe haven for human flourishing now. So I'm running this group, Right Hearted, and it's a group of 30 writers. And what's happening there in terms of the bond and connection, the degree of safety that's present, what's happening there is really extraordinary. And I've got in what's in my attention is small communities are it right now. We need more safe havens, we need leaders, people who can create a safe environment for people to unfold, share, be seen and heard, support one another. And so I think that's where things are headed right now is we need community more than ever. And I think it's got to be smaller communities,
Yeah.
pods that have competent leadership, not competent in the sense of, being an expert, but competent in stepping back and holding safe space for people to really deeply and authentically connect with each other.
Well, I'm totally on the same wavelength. And doing some research this morning, I just came across this term, which I'm going to bring it up here. Can you hear it is? It's a Japanese term. You may know it. I hadn't never heard of it. Yutori, which means intentionally slowing down to simply be,
Hmm.
breathe, listen, and appreciate the beauty of nature and life. Consciously creating space to relax, reflect, and integrate rather than constantly being busy or rushed.
As you're saying
Oh,
that, Will, it reminds me of I was watching a documentary about blue zones recently, these areas in the world where people live much longer. And the assumption was that it was something about the climate or must be what they're eating. And those are certainly factors. But what they found is that the biggest contributing factor to people's longevity, and not just longevity, but quality of life during that longevity, was these pods, these closely connected groups of people who cared about each other, who listened to each other, who took care of each other. Those, when they got right down to it, those were the core reasons why people lived longer, were happier, and more content, because they had that core group of people that they could really do life with in a significant way. And I
interesting.
thought, what an amazing finding, because it doesn't have to be a particular climate or a particular diet. It's the willingness to create that group and be part of that group.
Yeah, well, it's a climate, it's a social climate,
Yes, yes.
and that's fascinating that's and not but not surprising to me. Like we all feel it. We all know that what it's like when you feel connected to a network of individuals who where there's some shared values there, some deeply shared values.
Yeah, truly. Well, it's going to be exciting to see where this group goes, Rick. And I, as you know one person that's in that group, and it's making such a difference for them personally. Just have the chance to be in the group and to start to share their stories. They're a writer also, but they've never, I don't think, had an audience that actually gave them feedback in real time, and to appreciate their stories and who they are. So yeah, I know, growing up, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family where stories were very valuable and very malleable intentionally, to play with them and look at them in different ways. And our practice at dinner time was sit around the table and tell the story of what happened that day. And
That's
inevitably, there was going to
fantastic.
be a lot of laughter. And we had
Yeah.
a dining nook that kind of went out towards our neighbor's house. And I remember one time our neighbors were very serious. They were very upstanding, citizens and highly placed in the society. And we were in the middle of one of our great laughing story nights, and the doorbell rang. And my mother got up and went to the door. And here was this woman, very, soberly said, "Hello, Mrs. Harding. I'm checking to see if everything's okay at your house." And my mom went, "Yes, why?" "Well, we constantly hear so much laughter." And my mother just said, "That's what we do here. We love life and we laugh. Thank you for checking, though." And, closed the door and walked back.
That's
And I thought, my
hilarious.
goodness, it's life can be really serious, that there are times that are definitely serious, but I think also in between, laughter is one of the things that keeps us sane and alive.
Chris, do you remember? I think I told you I interviewed Swami Beyondananda on my podcast. I don't know if you know him, Rick.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's a friend of mine. He's a very funny guy. And I asked him to close our show the way he would close one of his live shows. So he got his Indian accent going, which I can't duplicate. And he said something like this. He said, laughter is very much like having an orgasm. So thank you all for coming.
Nice.
He is a piece of work. Well, Rick, thank you for joining us and being part of this. Look forward to 2 more opportunities in the future, but this was rich.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate getting to chat with you all.
All right. And You can find Rick at ricklewis.co, and you can see a little bit of a silent version of the waiter routine, as well as the books and the work that he's done. So take care, Rick. We'll catch up with you soon.
All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Great to meet you.